At first light, the forest is still half asleep, a world of silhouettes and vapor where mist drips from the canopy like cooling breath. Then, from somewhere above the eucalypt crowns, comes a sound that slices through the dawn like laughter from another realm. It begins as a single chuckle, then rises into a rolling crescendo, manic, joyous, and commanding. Within seconds, others answer across the ridges, their echoes tumbling through the folds of the bush, until the entire valley becomes a mesh of voices. This is not chaos. It is census. The kookaburra's dawn chorus is a broadcast of identity and occupation, a sonic border drawn in overlapping rings of sound. Each family calls from its roosting territory, announcing that the night has passed without loss, that the group remains intact, the perimeter unbreached, and the forced order restored for another day. Through the pale haze, camera pans reveal family groups perched along the same branch, adults, subadults, and last season's fledglings, their bodies aligned like sentinels at attention. The laughing call is not a random outburst, but a layered performance. Each bird slots into rhythm, timing its cackle between the calls of its kin. The rhythm carries across kilometers, traveling farther than the eye can see, but not beyond the ears of those who matter. Rival groups whose boundaries meet at invisible fault lines in the forest map. To the human ear, it is laughter. To other kookaburras, it is geometry. The exact tempo, pitch break, and duration form an acoustic fingerprint unique to each family, a biological signature that prevents costly skirmishes over overlapping land. As the sun lifts and light fractures through the gum leaves, the atmosphere of the forest shifts. The laughing stops. The kookaburras fan out to their hunting posts, low on the ground or atop dead branches where the view is open. The stillness that follows is deliberate, a listening phase. Here begins the second act of the kookaburra's day, the conversion of sound from social anthem to surveillance tool. Every rustle in the underbrush, every flick of a skink tail becomes data. The bird's broad, dark eyes are tuned for ground contrast, while the short, heavy bill acts as both spear and hammer, capable of crushing lizards or small snakes with one downward blow. Yet for all its predatory power, the kookaburra's greatest weapon is still its voice. Midday brings new acoustic signals, shorter, sharper cackles that carry urgency rather than jubilation. Researchers mapping these vocalizations have discovered that different call types correlate with specific threat categories. A rapid, clipped chock 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 often signals a ground predator, a goanna moving through the leaf litter, a carpet python uncoiling along a branch. The alarm spreads outward like ripples on a pond. Fairy wrens dive for cover. Wallabies freeze mid-graze, ears swiveling toward the source. A magpie joins the alert with its own harsh chatter, transforming the single note into a forest-wide broadcast. When the alarm pitch shifts upward, a longer, more continuous scream, the threat usually comes from above. Raptors, wedge-tailed eagles, goshawks, or even smaller kestrels hunting at the forest edge. The kookaburras rarely flee. They fix their gaze skyward, calling continuously to signal that they've been seen, that surprise is lost. The very act of alarm neutralizes the element of stealth, often forcing the predator to abandon its approach. The term scientists use for this phenomenon, information cascade, feels almost too clinical for what it describes. In practice, it is the choreography of an ecosystem under pressure. One species detects danger. Others interpret the signal and react in milliseconds, whether or not they understand its original meaning. The forest behaves like a single neural network, transmitting alarm pulses across layers of canopy and ground. In controlled field experiments, playback recordings of kookaburra calls at different frequencies produce measurable ripples of behavior. Small birds alter their feeding routines, mammals retreat toward denser cover, and the entire acoustic profile of the habitat quiets within seconds. By timing these responses, researchers can calculate the reaction latency, a kind of biological internet speed. In many cases, the forest completes the loop within 2 seconds of the initial call, faster than most human social media alerts. To capture this, imagine the camera tracking a single laugh as it propagates. At 0.2 seconds, a pair of crimson rosellas lift from a nearby branch. At 0.5 seconds, a wallaby raises its head, nostrils flaring. By 1.8 seconds, the far side of the clearing has fallen silent. Even the cicadas pause their droning. What began as one bird's response has become an entire ecosystem's coordinated defense, a self-organizing chain of awareness linking species that may never otherwise interact directly. The kookaburra, perched calm and watchful, becomes less a predator and more a switchboard, a node connecting visual, auditory, and behavioral channels across taxa. From an evolutionary standpoint, this networked vigilance confers enormous advantages. Forests in Australia are structurally complex and acoustically crowded. Line of sight is limited. The ability to borrow another species' senses can mean the difference between life and death. Over generations, animals have learned to interpret not just the presence of kookaburra calls, but their nuance, the tempo, amplitude, and direction. Studies show that even introduced species like rabbits and deer quickly adapt, reacting appropriately to native alarm codes within a single breeding season. The calls thus function as a shared security system, one that transcends species boundaries and maintains ecological balance through collective attention. But not all calls are about danger. When heat builds and thermals shimmer over the forest floor, kookaburras sometimes resume their laughter, not for joy nor for alarm, but for control. A midday cackle may be a territorial reaffirmation, a reminder to rivals that despite the day's hunts, the land still belongs to them. The sound is carried by convection currents, drifting over kilometers of canopy where visual markers are scarce. In this way, acoustic territory replaces fences or scent posts. The forest becomes partitioned by sound, invisible borders defined by who can shout the loudest and longest. The mechanism of this communication lies in the bird's anatomy. The kookaburra's voice box, or syrinx, sits deep at the junction of its bronchial tubes, allowing it to modulate pitch from both sides of the trachea simultaneously. Few birds possess such fine control. By opening one bronchus while constricting the other, the bird produces a dual-tone resonance, the signature laugh that rises and falls in a haunting rhythm. Each note carries a spectral fingerprint identifiable by sonogram analysis. What seems to humans like spontaneous humor is, in biological reality, an encoded data burst containing information about group size, stress level, and even physical fitness. To understand the ecological reach of this sound, scientists conducted playback experiments across open woodland and dense eucalypt forest. Speakers positioned at varying distances mimicked live birds, using recorded calls of differing intensity. Hidden cameras tracked animal reactions, not just the obvious ones like flight or freezing, but subtler behaviors. pause in foraging, ear rotation, head tilt. The results were astonishingly consistent. Even at 300 meters, smaller birds altered their routines within seconds. Mammals, like bandicoots and possums, displayed hesitation behaviors long before any visual cue arrived. The forest was listening, always, to itself. Viewed from above, this acoustic vigilance system resembles an overlapping network of radar sweeps. Each kookaburra family occupies a central node, their calls radiating outward like sonar pings. Where territories overlap, signals reinforce one another, reducing blind spots. In effect, the species has turned the noisy chaos of the Australian bush into an information grid, one that can detect intrusion, communicate alarm, and reset equilibrium, all without centralized control. No planning, no leaders, no hierarchy, only evolved cooperation through shared sound. Yet for all their utility, the calls retain a strange beauty. As dusk descends, the forest prepares for another cycle, and laughter rolls once more through the gum valleys. This time, it carries a different texture, lower, slower, almost nostalgic. The families regroup at the same roost branches, the same silhouettes that greeted the sunrise. The laughter softens into chuckles, then quiets completely as the first fruit bats cross the sky. The system resets, the watch shifts from day to night, and the sirens fall silent. In that silence lies the true measure of the kookaburra's role. It is both predator and protector, killer and communicator. Its laughter is not mere mirth, but language, a code that keeps the bush coherent, a sound that orders the living mosaic before chaos can take hold. The forest breathes through it, synchronizing heartbeat and alarm, dawn and dusk, awareness and rest. Tomorrow, before the light returns, the cycle will begin again. The first laugh sparking across the trees like a match struck against the dark, calling every ear in the forest back to life. At the tide's slow retreat, the rock pools of southern Australia shimmer with refracted sky, shallow worlds of broken light, fragile and fleeting between waves. Beneath their mirrored surfaces, every movement is magnified. A crab's antenna pulse, a blenny's flicker, the slow bloom of seaweed drawn by the current. And there, almost invisible against the sand and shell grit, a creature no larger than a golf ball sits perfectly still. Its body, soft mottled beige with tiny freckles of brown, looks like nothing more than a scrap of sponge caught between barnacles. Only the eyes betray sentience, two perfect black orbs, unblinking, assessing. It is the blue-ringed octopus, one of the smallest but most lethally armed animals on the planet. Its camouflage is flawless until the world disturbs it. A stray fish brushes past, or a hand dips into the shallows, and the transformation begins. A visual symphony measured in fractions of a second. Electric cobalt rings bloom across its mantle and arms, spreading outward like ink dropped into clear water. Each ring flashes, fades, then returns with even greater intensity, synchronized to a heartbeat that is not audible but visible. The display is mesmerizing. Geometry, rhythm, and light combined into a language of absolute clarity. This is not a threat in the human sense. It is an equation. Each pulse represents distance, intent, and probability of harm, calibrated precisely to the intruder's proximity. To the camera's macro lens, each ring becomes a living pixel, a perfect circle of iridescent tissue bordered by a darker pigment ring. The source of this glow lies in specialized chromatophores and iridophores, pigment sacs and reflective plates layered in the skin like adaptive screens. When the octopus tightens or relaxes its muscles, the layers shift, scattering light differently to produce the famous neon hue. But what appears instantaneous is, in truth, an energy-intensive process. Every flash consumes muscular effort and oxygen, a costly investment for an animal with a small body and limited reserves. The octopus therefore uses its warning sparingly, a gradient rather than a switch, faint rings at long range, escalating to full radiance only when the intruder persists. Field recordings made under controlled conditions reveal the precision of this escalation. At a distance of 1 meter, the blue rings flicker at roughly 1 pulse per second, a subtle shimmer easily missed by casual observers. At 50 centimeters, the frequency doubles, creating a visual vibration that competes with the flickering light of the water surface. By 20 centimeters, the display enters full alarm. Rings expand, contract, and overlap, creating a strobing mosaic across the entire body. It is at this stage that the animal's posture also changes. Arms lifted slightly, mantle inflated. A universal posture of do not touch. The entire display lasts only a few seconds before fading back to neutral. A system reset designed to save energy and avoid drawing attention from larger hunters patrolling nearby. Because in these shallow pools, visibility is both an advantage and a liability. The octopus's bright rings can repel a crab or scorpionfish, but they might also attract the gaze of aharon above or a predatory moray from a neighboring crevice. Natural selection, therefore, has tuned the warning to balance two opposing needs, clarity and discretion. Researchers studying the display under varying light levels found that ring brightness is optimized for the diffuse illumination typical of overcast days, exactly when rockpool predators are most active. Under full sun, the rings appear slightly dimmer, their spectral contrast reduced by glare. In turbid water, where suspended sand scatters light, the rings brighten to compensate. This adaptive modulation ensures that the signal remains legible across changing optical environments. An underwater billboard fine-tuned by evolution's slow mathematics. And yet, the message is not for all who can see it. It is a language with selective audiences. To a crab, the pattern reads as a final warning: approach and die. To a cuttlefish or another octopus, it says something subtler: recognition of armament parity. Both creatures are venomous, both intelligent, both capable of tactical restraint. Engaging would waste time, risk injury, and deplete reserves better used for hunting. The rings thus serve as an honest signal, a term biologists use for displays that accurately represent an animal's defensive or offensive capacity. Honest signals prevent pointless fights in crowded ecosystems where every encounter could end in mutual destruction. When a blue-ringed octopus flares its pattern, it is not bluffing. Its venom, a cocktail of tetrodotoxin, can kill within minutes. Because the cost of deception would be too high. If the signal lost credibility, so would its power to deter. The octopus's venom itself is a marvel of efficiency. Stored in salivary glands and delivered through its beak, tetrodotoxin blocks sodium channels in nerve cells, shutting down muscle control. Even large fish collapse almost instantly after a single bite. But the octopus rarely needs to use it defensively. Chemical analysis of wild individuals suggests that they maintain just enough toxin for immediate survival. Their venom synthesis is metabolically expensive. Thus, Every warning display that prevents a fight saves measurable energy and, by extension, life expectancy. Evolution has sculpted a minimalist strategy: intimidation as conservation. The microcosm of the rock pool amplifies these dynamics. Space is limited, refuge scarce. A single tide pool may contain shrimp, crabs, juvenile fish, anemones, and small cephalopods, all competing under variable light and oxygen levels. In this arena, escalation must be justified. A misread signal could result in injury or wasted energy. For the blue-ringed octopus, control over visibility becomes control over risk. It decides when to exist and when to disappear, when to flare like a beacon, and when to fade back into the reef's chaotic mosaic. Underwater imaging in situ reveals another layer of precision: the spatial pattern of ring activation. The display does not always cover the entire body. In partial warnings, only the arms nearest the threat illuminate, a targeted signal that minimizes exposure. As the intruder's angle of approach changes, the lit area shifts accordingly, suggesting a degree of sensory integration between visual input and skin response. Each arm acts as an independent light panel capable of responding locally to a shadow or vibration. This decentralized control mirrors the octopus's nervous architecture. 2/3 of its neurons reside in the arms rather than the brain, allowing near instantaneous autonomous reactions. What we perceive as coordinated pulsing is actually a distributed negotiation among 8 semi-independent minds. When scientists simulated predator approaches using mechanical models, small moving shadows or plastic fish, they discovered that ring pulsing speed increased linearly with the rate of perceived motion. In essence, the octopus calculates threat velocity, adjusting display intensity accordingly. The closer and faster the object, the more complete and synchronized the flash sequence becomes. This proportional response prevents overreaction to harmless disturbances like wave reflections while maintaining rapid readiness for genuine threats. It is, in biological terms, a real-time optimization problem solved through millions of years of iterative feedback. At the boundary between science and aesthetics, the spectacle borders on paradox. Humans find the display hypnotic, even beautiful, yet it evolved as a deterrent, an artwork meant to repel. Seen through polarized light filters, the rings reveal hidden wavelengths invisible to the human eye, but visible to marine animals equipped with polarization-sensitive vision. To them, the blue rings are not just bright, but multidimensional, pulsing in layers of intensity, shimmering with ultraviolet edge bands that make them impossible to ignore. The message echoes across species lines: "I am here, and I am not worth your mistake." As the tide returns, flooding the pools with fresh seawater, the octopus retreats into a crevice, its colors dissolving back into the stone. The rings vanish last one by one until the animal disappears entirely. The waves erase all evidence of the encounter. Yet, if we slow the footage and analyze frame by frame, a pattern emerges, a rhythm of light and restraint that defines survival along the temperate Australian coast. In the wider evolutionary sense, this flashing language belongs to a continuum of warning systems: the coral snake's bands, the wasp's stripes, the poison frog's glow. All rely on honesty, on the maintenance of a contract between signaler and observer. A warning only works when the threat behind it is real. The blue-ringed octopus, therefore, is both artist and mathematician, balancing the geometry of pattern, the physics of light, and the economics of survival. When viewed not as a curiosity, but as a formula, its display becomes something larger, a visible equation of risk and efficiency. Every pulse represents a calculation: how much light to reveal, how much energy to expend, how much time to buy. It is evolution distilled into mathematics, written in fluorescence and skin. And beneath that luminous beauty lies the most unforgiving constant of all. In the shallow, shifting world of the tide pool, the brightest signal belongs to the creature that cannot afford to lie. At the edge of the dry season, when heat hovers in the air like a mirage, and cicadas score the silence with their mechanical cry, the open woodlands of northern Australia shimmer under a pale, relentless sun. Beneath the angled trunks of eucalypts, a ripple of motion breaks the stillness. A small reptile freezes, its body blending with bark and shadow. The frilled lizard, Chlamydosaurus kingi, is a master of invisibility until it chooses otherwise. When threatened, it does not simply flee, it transforms. The camera tightens. A dingo's paw falls nearby, stirring dust. In that instant, the lizard snaps open a collar of skin and cartilage around its neck, and the forest geometry changes. The display is explosive. The frill unfurls in a full semicircle wider than the lizard's body, glowing with yellows, rusts, and ultraviolet tones invisible to the human eye. The head, once narrow and modest, appears 2 or 3 times larger, framed by a halo of living color. This sudden expansion, captured in slow motion, reveals the precision of its mechanics. The frill is anchored to elongated hyoid bones that swing forward like hinged struts, tensioned by fine muscles connecting the jaw and chest. Within 1/10 of a second, the lizard multiplies its apparent size, converting defense into performance. From a predator's perspective, the effect is momentary confusion, an unexpected surge of scale in a static environment. The dingo hesitates, head tilting, while the lizard hisses, mouth gaping wide enough to reveal bright inner linings patterned in scarlet and ivory. Under ultraviolet light, those surfaces blaze with contrast. Birds and mammals that perceive in the UV spectrum, including raptors, see not a muted flare, but an eruption of spectral energy cutting through shadow and foliage. The frill's mosaic of scales, backed by semi-translucent membranes, reflects UV wavelengths even under partial canopy shade, giving the illusion of luminescence. In the heat-distorted landscape, this flash of alien color reads as both danger and deception, a creature larger and less predictable than its true form. What appears to be drama is, in evolutionary terms, geometry at work. The frill's concave curvature amplifies the lizard's profile from multiple angles. When viewed head-on, it triples the apparent width of the skull. From above, it increases lateral spread, creating a shape that mimics the silhouette of much larger reptiles, perhaps a goanna or even a small monitor. The eyes, centered in the display, anchor the illusion, giving predators a false target zone that keeps strikes away from vital organs. It is an optical trick refined by millions of years of trial, an anatomical lens built not for seeing, but for being seen in exactly the right way. To understand why this tactic evolved, we must consider the predator matrix of the northern woodland. On the ground, dingoes and large snakes present close-quarters threats. From the air, kites and hawks patrol the clearings, with unblinking vision. Each enemy perceives the world differently. Against terrestrial hunters, the frill functions primarily as an amplifier, a sudden escalation of size and sound that may trigger a hesitation reflex. Against aerial predators, however, it becomes a rangefinder. The circular outline provides precise parallax cues. When a hawk dives and the frill expands, the changing symmetry tells the raptor exactly where the target is. Yet paradoxically, this may work in the lizard's favor. By flaring the frill and freezing, it declares itself aware of the attack, disrupting the raptor's advantage of surprise. Many bird strikes rely on stealth and unbroken trajectory. A target that locks eyes forces the hunter to abort or adjust. High-speed footage confirms the choreography. The sequence unfolds in 3 phases: turn tall, freeze, bolt. When danger approaches, the lizard first lifts its body on straightened hind legs, raising its head to nearly double its usual height. A move that maximizes frill visibility and brings the eyes to the horizon line. Then comes the freeze, a moment of absolute stillness lasting 1 to 2 seconds. In this pause, the frill is wide open, the mouth agape, the lizard motionless except for the slight tremor of its inflated throat. This is not indecision, it is calculation. The lizard is reading its opponent's reaction, measuring distance and intention. If the predator continues advancing, the final phase begins: the bolt. Hind limbs launch the body upright, tail extended as a stabilizer, and the animal sprints bipedally across the open ground, frill still raised like a banner of defiance. In shaded woodland, where visibility changes with every step, this 3-step defense proves superior to a straight sprint. Running immediately would expose the lizard's position to any other predator watching from cover. Instead, by freezing first, the animal buys a fraction of time for the camouflage around it to reassert. The contrast of its own body against the leaves diminishes as its frill begins to fold mid-run. This strategy works best in open shade, the dappled light zones beneath trees where visual clutter confuses movement-tracking eyes. Studies comparing predator success rates found that dingoes abandon pursuit in nearly half of such encounters, while raptors succeed far less often than in open sunlight conditions. To analyze this further, researchers built a mechanical model of the frill lizard using movable flaps and UV reflective paint. When presented to dingoes in controlled enclosures, the model triggered hesitation or withdrawal 80% of the time when deployed suddenly at short range. However, when the same display was shown continuously without movement, the response dropped sharply, indicating that the shock of expansion, not the static image, drives deterrence. This suggests the frill operates as a dynamic signal, exploiting predator perception limits rather than relying on pure visual mimicry. The evolutionary logic of this design aligns with the environmental rhythms of the Australian savanna. The frilled lizard is an ambush hunter of insects and small vertebrates, spending long periods motionless on trunks or branches near ground level. Camouflage serves it well until the moment it fails, when shadow becomes betrayal. At that instant, it cannot outpace every pursuer. It must instead outthink them. The frill provides a split-second advantage in that critical transition between concealment and flight, a pulse of visibility that resets the rules of engagement. From a physiological perspective, the frill is also integrated with thermoregulation. The thin membranes, richly vascularized, can dissipate heat rapidly when spread, functioning briefly as a radiator. After an intense display or chase, the lizard often perches with the frill half open, allowing airflow to cool the blood vessels beneath. Thus, a structure evolved for intimidation doubles as a thermal management tool in a habitat where temperature swings can exceed 20 degrees Celsius between shade and sun. The coloration of the frill itself carries a layered history. Spectral analysis reveals that its surface reflects strongly in both visible and ultraviolet wavelengths, but absorbs in the green-yellow range, the same band most prevalent in background foliage. This selective reflection creates maximum contrast against the surrounding forest palette, ensuring detectability across species. Many Australian birds, including the wedge-tailed eagle and the kookaburra, possess UV-sensitive cones. To them, the frill's burst of ultraviolet light appears as an unmissable flash of energy. Even under partial cloud, its reflectance surpasses that of nearby leaves by a factor of 4. For a ground-level animal, such optical performance is extraordinary, an adaptation tuned not just for beauty, but for communication across predator guilds. To appreciate the intelligence embedded in this design, one can observe its precision in context. When a dingo approaches, the frill's flare is broad, symmetrical, loud. The hiss carries low frequencies that resonate through the leaf litter, making the animal seem heavier. When a raptor circles above, the lizard turns its body to maintain face orientation, but deploys the frill more modestly, minimizing vertical surface area that could betray its position to multiple aerial angles. This modulation indicates that the display is not a reflex, but a decision, an adjustable defense calibrated to context. Within the broader ecological web, the frilled lizard's behavior contributes to the rhythm of the savanna's alert system. The sudden sound of its hiss or the flicker of its frill can startle insects, triggering ripples of motion that in turn attract birds, creating a chain of attention that propagates through the understory. Each such episode resets the microclimate of vigilance, a temporary heightening of awareness among nearby species. In this sense, the frilled lizard is both participant and catalyst in the acoustic landscape of alarm, echoing the role the kookaburra plays in sound-based signaling. One operates through laughter, the other through color and geometry, both mechanisms of communication and control. At dusk, when the air cools and the light flattens into amber, the lizard's world returns to equilibrium. It climbs a tree trunk, presses flat against the bark, and the frill folds seamlessly along its body, vanishing into the pattern of cracks and shadows. The same structure that moments ago radiated intimidation now becomes camouflage again, invisible until provoked. Evolution, in its quiet arithmetic, has balanced these dualities with surgical precision. The frill amplifies and conceals, startles and cools, deceives and informs. It is not simply an ornament or an accident of excess. It is an adaptive machine tuned to the physics of light and the psychology of predators. In the harsh clarity of Australia's open woodland, where every movement can mean exposure, the frilled lizard survives not by speed alone, but by mastery of perception. When we slow the footage to its final frame, the display's beauty becomes mathematical. The membrane's arcs form perfect radial symmetry, each rib segment aligned like the spokes of a compass. The creature's entire survival depends on that geometry, a split-second bloom of structure and color that turns vulnerability into dominance. Then, as quickly as it began, the frill collapses, the illusion disappears, and the lizard is once again nothing more than bark and dust, a ghost of motion waiting for the next moment when the world decides to look too closely. The heat of the afternoon has pushed every living thing toward the margins, beneath logs, inside grass hollows, under stones that radiate yesterday's stored warmth. Across the pale gold plains of southern Australia, the air itself quivers with mirage. Nothing moves until the camera finds a ripple through the grass stems, a blunt, armored form pushing deliberately forward, scales catching flashes of light. The blue-tongue skink, Tiliqua synchronizes, emerges into a sunlit corridor between tufts of spinifex. To most eyes, it looks heavy, almost careless in its movement. Yet this slow reptile is a master of timing, and the most vivid color in this landscape lies hidden within its mouth. The skink's defenses depend on surprise, not speed, not venom, but the shock of contrast. When a predator approaches, the animal doesn't flee immediately. Instead, it inflates its body laterally, compressing air within its lungs to appear broader. The scales along its flanks lift slightly, their edges darkening as shadows fall between them, giving the illusion of spines. Then comes the second act, a rasping hiss forced through partially closed jaws, low and throaty like escaping steam. And then, with no warning, the jaws gape open and the world explodes with color. A vivid flash of pure sky blue tongue that snaps forward like a flag in the wind. Filmed in tight, slow motion, the display unfolds as a mechanical sequence. The tongue flicks in a fraction of a second, its surface glistening under the desert sun. A patch of saturated color against the beige and rust palette of the dry grass. To human eyes, it's striking. To the visual systems of birds and mammals, it is blinding. Predators perceive contrast differently. Their brains decode color through opponent channels, neural circuits that compare long wavelength red-yellow light against shorter blue-violet wavelengths. In open, sun-baked habitats dominated by yellow reflectance, blue becomes a neurological alarm, an impossible hue that jolts attention. The skink's tongue exploits this bias perfectly. By exposing a color almost absent from the landscape, it forces predators' visual systems into high contrast mode, the equivalent of shouting in pure color. But the brilliance is not only for attention, it's also a calculated gamble in mimicry. Across much of the skink's range, one of its most feared co-inhabitants is the death adder, a short, thick-bodied viper that ambushes prey by remaining invisible until the final strike. When cornered, the death adder performs its own threat display, a wide gape revealing the dark interior of its mouth, lined with bluish membranes that frame the fangs. To a predator viewing from above, especially a raptor like a kestrel or kite, both displays look eerily similar. The question of whether the skink's flash evolved to imitate this venomous gape has long intrigued biologists. Experimental setups have begun to test this venom mimic hypothesis. In controlled field trials, researchers presented raptors with two photographic stimuli, one showing the blue tongue's open-mouth display, the other the gape of a death adder. High-speed eye-tracking cameras measured the bird's latency before strike initiation. On average, hesitation times were nearly identical, about 0.35 seconds longer than for neutral, non-threatening images. In the economy of predator-prey interactions, that pause is an eternity. It means one more wing beat of distance, one more second to escape. The skink's survival often depends on that margin, the physics of a heartbeat. From a functional perspective, the display is an energy bargain. Producing pigment is costly, But the skink's blue is not pigment at all. It's structural color. Microscopic layers within the tongue's surface scatter light through nanoscopic interference, amplifying blue wavelengths while absorbing red. This structural origin makes the hue almost unchangeable with age or health, maintaining reliability as a signal. In evolutionary terms, honesty matters. Predators quickly learn to ignore bluffs, but a consistent, high-contrast signal backed by defensive behavior earns respect. The blue tongue's warning works because it is always paired with aggression. A hiss, a lunge, the forward jolt of the head. The performance convinces by conviction. Yet this theatricality has limits. The display is not meant for prolonged standoffs. Field observations show that the skink's defense follows a strict chain: inflate, hiss, flash, then flee. Each stage buys fractions of time, scaling in intensity as the threat closes. By the final act, escape is already pre-programmed. The skink turns abruptly and drives its short legs into the soil, tail held high, body swaying side to side in a sprint that looks ungainly, but covers ground faster than expected. The whole sequence, from first hiss to full retreat, can unfold in under 2 seconds, a choreography evolved through generations of near misses. Seen from above, this routine paints a visual rhythm across the savannah. A wedge-tailed eagle gliding low catches a flash of blue among the straw-colored blades. Its eyes, tuned to ultraviolet and motion contrast, register the signal as unnatural, perhaps venomous, perhaps diseased. It hesitates, wings tilting to abort the dive. On the ground, the skink has already vanished beneath a log, sides heaving from exertion. The tongue folds away, leaving only silence and the illusion of emptiness. In evolutionary terms, this interplay between signaler and receiver represents a feedback loop of escalating precision. The blue tongue's ancestors likely possessed duller tongues that flashed only as a byproduct of gape displays. Over time, predators that ignored these flashes learned hard lessons from death adders and other venomous species with similarly colored mouths. Those that hesitated survived. The selective pressure ran both ways. Skinks with brighter tongues or better timing reaped survival advantages. Across millennia, color and behavior fused into a coherent weapon of deception, a convergence of biology and perception. At the sensory level, the power of the display also lies in its temporal structure. Unlike the sustained colors of opossum-atic frogs or coral snakes, the skink's warning is momentary, a strobe rather than a flag. In the visual cortex of predators, transient flashes generate stronger neural responses than steady signals. The sudden onset and disappearance of blue triggers, novelty detectors, specialized neurons that prioritize new stimuli, compelling immediate attention, and, critically, caution. The skink's flash hijacks that reflex before the predator can analyze context. The result is hesitation through overstimulation, a brief neurological overload in the enemy's brain. From a behavioral ecology standpoint, the skink's reliance on display rather than speed makes perfect sense. Its body is heavy, its tail thick with fat reserves, a metabolic insurance policy against the unpredictable climate of the outback. It cannot outpace an eagle or outrun a dingo over open ground. Its defense, therefore, must occur before pursuit begins, at the decision point of the predator. The blue tongue operates as a negotiation tool. Attack me, and you may regret it. Often, that statement is enough. The strategy also reflects an ecological compromise between visibility and concealment. Unlike many desert dwellers, the blue tongue is diurnal, basking openly to regulate body temperature. Its scales, patterned in alternating dark and light bands, create optical camouflage that breaks its outline among sun-spotted grass. Yet this camouflage conflicts with the need for communication. The tongue resolves that contradiction. It allows the animal to remain cryptic until danger appears, then advertise explosively only when necessary. In evolutionary design terms, the blue tongue's display is a collapsible billboard, invisible until deployed, brilliant for an instant, then gone. To test how environmental lighting affects this display, researchers filmed wild skinks under variable cloud and substrate conditions using multispectral cameras. Under full sun, the blue tongue's reflectance peaked at 470 nanometers, contrasting nearly five-fold with surrounding grass reflectance values. In overcast conditions, the relative contrast dropped, but the perceived saturation, the psychological intensity of color, increased due to the predator's visual adaptation to a muted background. In both cases, the blue maintained its disruptive power. Interestingly, when displays were simulated under infrared light, invisible to most diurnal predators, the tongue vanished completely, confirming that the adaptation targets a specific visual ecology rather than a universal one. For the skink, the cost of error remains high. Raptors quickly learn the limits of bluffing. If a bird attacks despite the flash, the lizard's last defense is armor, overlapping osteoderm plates beneath its scales that deflect talons and teeth. But physical defense is a fallback. Psychological warfare remains the preferred tactic. In the open grasslands where cover is sparse, the first impression often decides survival. By dusk, as the air cools and long shadows stretch across the plains, the skink retreats to its burrow. The day's heat seeps back into the soil, carrying the scent of eucalyptus and dust. In the fading light, the animal's tongue flicks briefly at the air, not in warning now, but in scent detection, tasting humidity and the chemical traces of other creatures. The same organ that bluffed death in daylight now maps safety in darkness. Viewed through the lens of adaptation, the blue tongue story is less about color and more about precision. The right signal at the right moment to the right observer. It is an animal that manipulates perception itself, weaponizing the limitations of vision. Its strategy embodies the quiet arithmetic of evolution. In a land of extremes, where life survives on timing more than strength, even a flash of color can become a mathematical edge. When slowed to 1,000 frames per second, the tongue surface reveals a wet, iridescent landscape. Micro ridges glistening with moisture, each droplet reflecting the sky. In that fleeting glint lies a message written in light. I see you, and I am not what you think. It is the oldest bluff in the book, honed by the physics of attention, the psychology of fear, and the unspoken rule of Australia's dry heart. That in the contest between predator and prey, hesitation is victory. At ground level, the forest floor of southeastern Australia looks calm. Dry leaves layered over clay, dappled sunlight cutting through the eucalypts. But at this scale, order and chaos coexist in chemical form. Beneath the mulch, invisible rivers of scent pulse through the air, drifting over the soil like unseen highways. Each molecule carries a fragment of instruction. Forage here, defend there, danger ahead. The source is a colony of bull ants, giants among ants, each nearly 3 centimeters long, their copper-red bodies gleaming under the lens. They move with deliberate grace, yet every step follows a code that no eye can see. One worker pauses. The camera tightens to macro, capturing a droplet of pheromone seeping from the tip of her sting sheath. She presses her abdomen to the ground, dragging a microscopic trail as she walks, a scent line as thin as a thread of vapor. To the colony, this is language, a sentence written in chemistry. The droplet evaporates almost instantly, yet the molecules persist, clinging to the substrate and curling into the air. Within seconds, others pass over it, antennae quivering as if tasting wind. Their nervous systems translate molecular shapes into meaning. To visualize this hidden network, researchers release harmless smoke above the trail. The air shimmers with grey plumes that twist and fragment, a physical analogue of odor diffusion. In still air, the smoke flows smoothly, tracing a continuous ribbon. But when the breeze shifts, the ribbon fractures, scattering into tendrils that curl, collide, and vanish. This is what the ants experience, a message made of turbulence, a trail turning into a broken telegraph. Yet somehow they read it. They pause at gaps, loop outward in widening arcs, and then rejoin the trail farther ahead, repairing the line through collective inference. It's a demonstration of distributed problem-solving at its most primal, each ant processing incomplete data, the colony as a whole restoring coherence. The strength of their communication lies in redundancy. Every worker carries a different chemical dialect, dozens of compounds mixed in varying ratios. Some are simple hydrocarbons that mark direction or food quality. Others are alarm signals, volatile acids that spread fast and trigger aggression. A single bull ant sting releases enough to alert dozens, yet the same molecule in different concentrations can mean entirely different things. Low intensity draws helpers, high intensity summons soldiers. This chemical flexibility allows the colony to adapt instantly to shifting conditions without centralized control. One experiment reveals just how sensitive and interdependent this system is. In a controlled field setup, a single forager is captured, briefly exposed to ethanol vapor, a neutral scent foreign to the colony, and then returned. Within seconds of her re-entry, antennae rise around her like periscopes. Workers touch her, recoil, then touch again. The colony hesitates. A wave of agitation spreads from the nest entrance. Guards emerge, jaws open. The air becomes thick with alarm pheromones. Within moments, the decision tree flips. What was a foraging ground transforms into a defensive perimeter. The altered chemical signature has corrupted the colony's recognition algorithm. To the group, the worker is no longer a messenger, but an intruder. She's attacked, subdued, sometimes killed. This brutal efficiency underscores how the bull ant's order depends on chemical fidelity. The colony's mind, if we can call it that, exists not inside individual brains, but in the shared medium of scent. Disrupt the chemistry, and cognition collapses. It's a fragile intelligence, one that operates in gradients rather than absolutes. At dusk, another sense joins the network. The bull ant is unusual among ants for its reliance on vision. Its compound eyes, immense for its body size, contain more than twice the number of ommatidia found in typical nocturnal ants. In the fading light, these lenses capture every glint and shadow. The transition from day to night transforms the colony's sensory hierarchy. The chemical channels weaken as volatile molecules disperse, and visual cues begin to anchor behavior. Foraging trails that were once scent highways become illuminated pathways of memory, ants orienting by skyline contours, tree silhouettes, and the position of the sinking sun. When the light drops below a threshold, the two systems merge. Each worker moves by alternating between smell and sight, scanning air with antennae while adjusting course through visual landmarks. It is a dance of dual modalities, the integration of chemical precision with optical geometry. This is when the bull ant's enormous eyes show their true purpose. They do not merely gather light, they map movement in 3 dimensions, detecting shifts in the brightness gradient that indicate wind-blown pheromone plumes. The ants are, in essence, seeing smell, visualizing turbulence as motion patterns. Under the macro lens, this synergy becomes visible in subtle gestures. An ant halts, antennae elevated in a gentle sway. Its head tilts fractionally as the compound eyes pick up micro flickers of dust, proxies for invisible odor trails. In that instant, the animal triangulates direction, one sense measuring concentration, the other confirming flow. Then it continues, confident, as though following an illuminated road. This fusion of perception allows bull ants to navigate long distances, sometimes up to 100 meters from the nest, with accuracy rivaling that of bees. Yet their reliance on this hybrid sensory world makes them vulnerable to environmental noise. A sudden wind gust doesn't just scatter pheromones, it confuses visual reference points as branches sway. To compensate, bull ants deploy redundancy once again. Scouts leave multiple overlapping trails leading home, forming what ethologists call trail lattices. Each path carries slightly different chemical ratios, a kind of multi-channel encoding. If one is lost, another remains legible. In effect, the colony builds a chemical fail-safe network across the forest floor, an invisible mesh of directions, status updates, and priorities. During the height of foraging, the nest operates like a living command center. Workers return carrying prey, beetles, moths, even small vertebrates, their jaws rigid, their gait determined. At the entrance, others meet them, exchanging antennal touches that transfer microscopic traces of cuticular hydrocarbons. These exchanges aren't greetings, they're updates. Each contact adjusts the colony's internal state. Food source stable, predator scent detected, path obstructed. The result is an emergent decision system. No single ant holds the plan, yet the group behaves as if guided by a unified intelligence. When danger arrives, that intelligence transforms instantly. A camera placed at the nest mouth captures the sequence. A shadow passes overhead, perhaps a bird, perhaps just cloud movement. A fraction of a second later, alarm pheromones surge through the entrance tunnel. Guards pour out, mandibles raised, antennae whipping. Their coordination is near telepathic, but it's chemistry, not thought. Each molecule of alarm diffuses outward, replicated by each new responder until the colony's perimeter blooms into a radius of defense. Within seconds, every ant within several meters of the nest behaves as one body, responding to an invisible chemical wave. This responsiveness makes bull ants formidable ecological players. Their raids clear decomposing material, their predation keeps insect populations balanced, and their tunnels aerate soil. But their aggression also means that a single misread scent can trigger full-scale mobilization. To other species sharing their habitat, skinks, spiders, even small marsupials, the bull ant's presence defines the boundaries of behavior. Few dare linger near their trails for long. The deeper we look into their communication, the more the colony resembles a nervous system writ across terrain. The nest is the brainstem. The workers are neurons firing along pathways of scent, and the pheromone gradients are neurotransmitters diffusing through extracellular space. Unlike neurons, however, these transmitters drift freely, shaped by wind, humidity, and temperature. The forest's microclimate becomes part of their cognition. The weather itself influences thought. As twilight deepens, the ants retreat. The last foragers return, guided by low amber light filtering through eucalypt leaves. The camera lingers on a single worker as she pauses before entering the nest. A final droplet of pheromone glistens at her abdomen's tip, the punctuation mark of a day's message. Then she descends into the dark, the chemical signal dissolving behind her. The colony's surface goes still, yet its invisible architecture remains, a faint chemical scaffolding that will persist until morning. By sunrise, dew and heat will erase those traces, resetting the system for another cycle of scent and response. Each day begins with zero memory, yet the same order re-emerges. Proof that intelligence need not be permanent to be powerful. In the world of the bull ant, thought is vapor, strategy is chemistry, and the forest itself is both medium and message. What we perceive as instinct is, in truth, an ongoing negotiation between molecules and minds, a civilization built on signals too small to see, but precise enough to command an army. Beneath the cold surface swells of southern Australia, where kelp forests bend in rhythmic unison to the pulse of the sea, there lives a creature so perfectly tuned to this movement that it seems less an animal than an idea made flesh. The leafy sea dragon, Phycodurus X, drifts among the surge channels like a dream of the kelp itself, a living equation that reconciles motion, light, and patience. Its frilled appendages, each leaf-like filament trailing in slow arcs, do not propel it so much as disguise its presence within the moving world. Every sway, every pause is timed to water's rhythm. The animal's camouflage is not static paint. It is choreography, camouflage through synchronization. In the filtered light below 10 meters, visibility rises and falls with each wave pulse. When the swell rolls in, stalks of kelp lean together, their blades whispering against one another. When it retreats, they spring upright in slow release. The sea dragon's body traces these same oscillations, rocking gently forward and back, never a beat ahead or behind. Its lateral fins, nearly transparent, almost invisible, beat just fast enough to counter drift without breaking phase. Through the lens, the effect is uncanny. Where the water moves, it moves. Where it pauses, it floats motionless. Only the eyes, swiveling independently, hint at awareness behind the illusion. This precise imitation is not instinct alone, but an evolved feedback system of sensory calibration. Tiny pressure sensors along the skin, analogues of the lateral line in other fishes, detect microcurrents, allowing the dragon to measure the frequency of surrounding flow. Its nervous system matches fin motion to that frequency, a behavior biologists term phase matching. When the wave period changes, so does the animal's rhythm. In calm water, the swaying slows to near stillness. In surge, it accelerates seamlessly. The body becomes a living metronome, locked to the tempo of its habitat. To visualize this, researchers deployed synchronized cameras and mechanical wave generators along a section of reef where dragons commonly reside. By controlling the speed and amplitude of artificial surges, they could measure how closely each individual's motion correlated with the kelp's sway. The results showed near-perfect synchronization, deviations of less than 0.1 seconds across multiple cycles. But when the experimenters altered the wave tempo abruptly, the sea dragons lagged momentarily, breaking rhythm. Only then did predators notice. Footage of snapper and wrasser circling nearby revealed a pattern. When the dragon's motion fell out of sync by more than half a wave phase, predatory attention spiked by over 70%. Motion mismatch, not color or shape, betrayed the disguise. This finding reframes our understanding of camouflage. It is not merely a matter of visual resemblance, but of temporal coherence, blending into the world not just in form, but in timing. In dynamic environments like kelp forests, where light, shadow, and motion constantly shift, the challenge is to remain invisible through behavior, not pigment. The leafy sea dragon has refined this principle to an art form. Its lobes are colored in muted greens and golds that mirror the tones of sunlit kelp. But it is the precision of its movement that completes the illusion. To a predator's eye, attuned to motion as much as contrast, the dragon's perfect phase alignment renders it statistically indistinguishable from the vegetation. Seen in high definition, the complexity of this performance deepens. Along its body, each filament is independently flexible, bending at slightly different angles as water pressure varies across its surface. The effect is fractal, a fine-scale mimicry nested within a larger one. Under side lighting, the appendages scatter photons like thin kelp blades, producing the same polarized shimmer that fish eyes associate with inanimate foliage. Even the dragon's occasional twitch when it adjusts position mimics the erratic flutter of loose weed torn by current. Evolution has sculpted not a disguise of stillness, but of believable imperfection. In the surge channel, where waves compress and release like lungs, the dragon's environment becomes both cradle and cover. These channels form natural corridors between rock ridges, amplifying current speed as water funnels through. Inside them, the noise of movement masks all but the most conspicuous signals. A fish that swims too decisively stands out. A creature that drifts correctly disappears. For the leafy sea dragon, survival depends on staying within the margin of uncertainty, moving just enough to match the kelp's confusion, but never enough to claim independence from it. Predators here operate on probability. Snapper, scorpionfish, and even small seals scan the kelp for anomalies, shapes or motions that break rhythm. Experiments using 3D printed models painted in identical colors but programmed to sway at incorrect frequencies confirmed this sensitivity. At mismatched tempos, predators attacked twice as often as when the models moved in sync. To them, the deception fails not through pattern, but through pulse. Nature's camouflage, it seems, has a soundtrack. The leafy sea dragon's anatomy supports this precision with remarkable economy. It lacks the swim bladder typical of many fish, relying instead on delicate pectoral and dorsal fins for buoyancy control. These fins generate micro-thrusts that can offset surge force without changing orientation, allowing the dragon to hover in place even as water roars past. High-speed footage reveals that the dorsal fin's oscillation frequency increases in inverse proportion to wave amplitude. a self-regulating system that maintains visual stasis amid turbulence. It is, in effect, a biological stabilizer, like the gimbal of a camera. At dusk, as the light filters to gold and the surge slows, the dragon's camouflage shifts again. The kelp darkens, its blades twisting lazily in weakened current. The sea dragon's body follows suit, relaxing into slower arcs. Its color tone, aided by chromatophores beneath the skin, subtly warms, greens deepening to amber, whites fading toward translucence. The transformation is imperceptible in real time, yet measurable over minutes. This adaptive color drift ensures the animal remains blended into the forest's twilight palette, extending the illusion into changing hours. Even the dragon's mating rituals conform to camouflage logic. When courting, pairs mirror each other's movements so precisely that they resemble two swaying fronds tethered by invisible current. Their contact rituals occur within thick kelp cover, minimizing visual exposure. The male carries the fertilized eggs on a specialized brood patch under his tail, where their spherical shape and translucent casing mimic clusters of algae. Through every stage of its life, concealment is not a response, but a lifestyle. Invisibility as a reproductive strategy. In the laboratory, attempts to replicate the dragon's stealth reveal just how fragile its disguise is. When scientists played recorded surge patterns through an artificial tank and then gradually increased or decreased tempo, the animals adapted smoothly within their native frequency range. But when frequencies exceeded natural limits, as might occur during storms or extreme tidal surges, the dragons became visibly stressed. Their phase control faltered, they drifted awkwardly, and their body color darkened. Under these unnatural rhythms, they ceased to blend, reverting to mere creatures rather than illusions. In nature, such mismatch could mean discovery, and discovery, death. What emerges from this research is a profound principle. The leafy sea dragon's camouflage is not about disappearance, but about participation. It survives by becoming a piece of the system's rhythm, a participant in the kelp's collective sway. The sea does not hide it, the sea moves through it. Predator and prey alike are bound by the same tempo, and the one who best aligns with that beat remains unseen longest. From an ecological perspective, this behavior underscores the complexity of coastal ecosystems shaped by motion. In surge channels, even plants are kinetic, their identities defined by how they move. The leafy sea dragon's evolutionary path reflects a deeper truth of dynamic environments, that stillness is the most conspicuous act. In habitats ruled by oscillation, the quietest form of communication is rhythm itself. As the final light fades and the water calms to a whisper, the dragon drifts back into shadow. The camera lingers close, capturing one last glimpse of its frilled silhouette suspended in golden haze. For a moment, it is impossible to tell where the animal ends and the kelp begins. Then the swell returns, and everything moves together again, one slow, breathing organism made of leaf, current, and illusion. The rule holds. In a world built on signals, the perfect lie is not a shout of color or motion, but silence calibrated to the rhythm of life. To vanish completely, one must first learn the music of the place, and never miss a beat.